All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. This is IGTV here in New York City, a product of New York City Metro InfraGard Members Alliance. On with us now is Craig Floyd, the CEO of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. Craig, why don't you take it away? I know you've got a report. It's the end of the year. It's going to be a little extensive, so go ahead.
Joe, some very troubling numbers that we had to issue in the last week. We always do our annual fatality report for law enforcement at the end of the year, and when we released those figures just last week, the numbers were startling to say the least. We had recorded 162 law enforcement officers across this country who died in the line of duty in 2010. That's a 40% increase over the 117 officers who died in the line of duty in 2009. And that follows 2 years of declining deaths for officers in this country. So we'd been encouraged by the declining fatality rate in 2008, 2009. But as soon as we turned that page over on the calendar to 2010, the numbers started to go up immediately, and unfortunately it never stopped. 162 officers killed nationwide. That included increases in all categories of death. Traffic-related incidents, once again, the #1 cause of death for law enforcement in this country. For the 13th year in a row, I should point out, we lost 73 officers in traffic-related incidents in 2010. 50 of those officers died in automobile crashes, many of them in single-car vehicle crashes. Now, a lot of people, I think, assume auto crashes means chasing fleeing felons. That used to be the case more often than not. Policies have changed, thankfully. We don't engage in high-speed vehicle pursuits anywhere near as often as we used to because it puts officer lives at risk. It puts innocent citizens' lives at risk. So as a result, our high-speed pursuit policies have been restricted tremendously. So what we're seeing then is officers who are responding to emergency calls, all right? They know that in some cases, a matter of seconds could make the difference between life or death. So they get to those scenes of crimes and distress as quickly as they can, sometimes putting themselves at great personal risk. And we saw that with the 50 fatal auto crashes for law enforcement in 2010. 16 officers were struck on the side of roadways, directing traffic, conducting a traffic stop, making sure an accident scene or a construction site was safe and secure, again, putting themselves at risk. We need to heed a law that's now the law of the land in 48 states across this country, and I always use this as an opportunity to promote it. It's called Move Over and Slow Down. That's true certainly in New York, as it is in every other state, 48 states in the country, I should say. And that is, when you see a police vehicle or any emergency vehicle on the side of the roadway, you are required by law to move over a lane if you have that option, but always slow down to a safer rate of speed to give that officer an added margin of safety. 16 officers last year struck and killed by motorists who were inattentive, drunk, drowsy, you name it, but those were preventable deaths, and the driving public can make a difference. 6 of those officers, by the way, also died in motorcycle crashes, and 1 officer on bike patrol was struck and killed by a vehicle. Let's turn now to firearms-related fatalities. For the 2nd year in a row, we saw more than a 20% increase in the number of officers killed by gunfire in this country. That is the #1 cause of death for law enforcement historically. About 56% of all the names, 19,000 names on the memorial, about 56% of them are officers who were killed by gunfire. So this has always been a problem. Obviously, law enforcement has to go up with some cold-blooded, brazen criminals as part of their job, and sometimes they're shot and killed by those criminals. It happened 61 times in 2010. That was about a 24% increase over the figure for 2009. We also saw, and this was particularly troubling, 5 what we call cluster killings of police officers. These are 10 officers in those 5 incidents who were shot and killed. More than 1 officer died in each of those incidents, and they were killed by a single assailant. Not only 1 officer dies, but multiple officers are killed in these so-called cluster killings. I believe that's a clear sign of a more cold-blooded, brazen criminal that's prowling the streets of America and that law enforcement has to deal with day in and day out. We saw the same thing happen, by the way, in 2009, even when deaths were way down, 117 for the year, the lowest in 50 years. We saw that there were 5 cluster killings in that year as well, resulting in 15 officers who were shot and killed. So this is a trend that is very troubling. 2 years in a row now, 25 officers killed in cluster killings. And again, a sign of the times perhaps, especially gangs, youth violence. Some of these people are cold, calculated killers, have no respect for human life, have no respect for authority or the law. And who's the most visible target out there when it comes to representing our government, when it comes to representing the law of the land? It's our law enforcement officers who are walking around in uniform, usually driving marked police cruisers. Everyone knows who they are, where they are, and if a criminal wants to kill one, unfortunately, they can do it. And they did 61 times. Officers were shot and killed in 2010. A comment also on that issue. I looked at the FBI report, which tracks the profile on these criminals who are killing cops. It turns out over the last 10 years, 165 cop killers were out on parole, probation, or some other form of judicial supervision at the time that they murdered that police officer. Tougher criminal justice could save as many as 16 lives a year when it comes to law enforcement, based on the FBI statistics. 28% of all the police officers who were feloniously killed over the last 10 years were killed by criminals out on parole or probation or some other form of judicial supervision. That's somewhat frightening, and I think it goes to the point that too many officers in this country are having to arrest and confront the same repeat violent offenders over and over and over again. And at some point, the odds catch up with you. And that's why I think as much as we tend to be a lenient society, forgiving, offering a second chance to many in this country, some people don't deserve that second or third or fourth chance. And there are some people that frankly don't deserve to be walking the streets of America. And I think when you look at how many cops were killed by those cold-blooded, brazen criminals in 2010, you have to come to the same conclusion. So these were some of the findings of our report this year. It was very troubling, obviously, to have to report a 40% uptick in law enforcement fatalities. I will tell you also that Texas had the #1 number of officers killed in the line of duty. More than any other state, they lost 19 officers, Texas did, in 2010, by far the most of any state. California was second with 11. Illinois had 10. There were 9 officers killed in Florida and 8 in Georgia in terms of the top 5 states with the most deaths. I will also say, and this was unfortunate, that Chicago Police Department lost 5 officers in 2010, all killed in the line of duty. And that tied the California Highway Patrol with the most officers killed in any one agency. So these were troubling facts that we put out in our end-of-the-year fatality report. On average, the age of these officers, about 39 years old. They'd been serving for about 12 years. So this isn't the officer right out of the academy that doesn't have the seasoning to do the job safely. These are veterans oftentimes that are being killed. Sometimes maybe a little complacent. Maybe they've stopped thousands of cars along the roadway and let down their guard for just that 1 second, and they become figures in our fatality report. Officers shot and killed during traffic stops, for example. Responding to a domestic violence call, one of the most dangerous calls an officer can go on. 1/3 of all the assaults and injuries for law enforcement are a result of domestic violence calls. Sometimes officers can respond to hundreds of those calls, and then that last one is the one that causes serious injury or possibly death. So the message here, I think, is very clear, that there is no such thing as a routine assignment for law enforcement. Every assignment is potentially life-threatening. That officer never knows when that life-threatening moment may come, but they know, and they should know, that it could come on the very next call. So never let your guard down, and never become complacent. And I think that message is out there loud and clear this year especially.
Yeah, Craig, it'd be of interest to me, in the shootings, were you able to drill down on that? Were those shootings committed in the course of other crime? In other words, was it in the course of a felony or a misdemeanor or something like that? Or were those separate other types of incidents where officers got drawn into some sort of gun battle?
Well, there were a variety of causes and circumstances involved in those shooting incidents. We're just now collecting all the details in those cases. Don't have a good analysis to give you, but I will tell you that based on history, that the number one cause of shooting fatalities, certainly near the top every year, is responding to these so-called domestic disturbance calls, where it's a very volatile situation. Weapons are often involved, alcohol or drugs are often involved, and an officer has to come on the scene with all of those factors kind of at work, and sometimes together they result in an officer's death or serious injury. As I mentioned, about a third of all the assaults and injuries for officers result from those domestic disturbance calls. So that's pretty well true, I'd say, with our firearms-related fatalities this year as well. Traffic stops, also a very dangerous situation for officers. In some cases, it was an ambush attack, no provocation. An officer simply, somebody wanted to kill a cop, and they went and found one and shot and killed that officer. So a variety of reasons, but certainly domestic disturbance calls right near the top of the list, year in and year out.
Yeah. All right. Craig Floyd, National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, based in Washington, D.C. We're happy to have you on the program. Unfortunately, it's not a great report this year, but the whole point of the program is to let our people and others around the country know what's going on in this particular area, that there are human beings, and as Craig and I have discussed in the past, there are families that are left in the past, and the deceased are deceased, but the families that are left in the wake of these tragedies, that's a whole other story altogether. All right, we really look out for them, and we sympathize with them, and certainly the greater law enforcement community supports them in every way that they can. So, Craig, thank you very much to you and your staff down in D.C. Congratulations on your academy, your museum that's building down there. We hope to hear more about that as the year goes on. And a belated Happy New Year, Happy Holiday to everybody down there. All right, and we look forward to having you on the program next month.
Good. Look forward to being back, and we'll talk a little more next month about the officers who've died recently. We always like to put a face, as you say, on the numbers that we release, and we'll be glad to do that at our next gathering.
Okay, great, Craig. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
Have a good day.
You too.